serpent-like suggestion through the corrupted countryside.
Hey there everyone, before we continue, I'm just going to give a little recap on the channel and then we'll get into Darkest Dungeon. This channel started 2 years ago with an upload on April 1st. These were Dark Souls 3 drop rates. There are technically 7 games posted on the channel, ranging from first-person shooters to RPG role-like games. However, Darkest Dungeon probably makes up, at this point, 90 to 95, if probably closer to 95% of the content. I do eventually plan on branching out into other games. Probably this summer. I am slightly running low on Darkest Dungeon guides and stuff, even though I will be doing a modded run. Eventually, I believe I will get into Sekiro and possibly other stuff. My best video is the 6 tips / early game guide at 116,000 views, which is pretty good. So all I have to say is thank you for everyone joining, and thank you for all of you watching. It is greatly appreciated, and hopefully we have a lot more videos and years to come for this channel. Now, I want to talk about things I think Darkest Dungeon did very well. The current Darkest Dungeon, not Darkest Dungeon 2. I'm going to go through what Darkest Dungeon did very quickly so we can kind of build upon that in Darkest Dungeon 2. Things they got right, the enemies feel pretty balanced and the capabilities they can do. There's really not too many enemies where you feel like you have to cheese them. There's a couple that are really annoying, but almost every enemy has a way to overcome them, and almost every composition has a way to overcome it. So it's not like you face a composition or two and your run is over, where you get so beat up you have to end. Some are certainly more hard than others, but honestly that's the balance of the game. Therefore, we can't really complain about there being some hard compositions and some non-hard compositions, because the amount of compositions run into are obviously RNG dependent, so it's not like the game purposely tries to screw you over or give you an easy time. It's all based on that area's RNG that day. Another thing I think they did pretty well is each area feels fairly unique, obviously in their setting, their music, and obviously the enemies. They could expand upon this in Darkest Dungeon 2, though I do feel like it was pretty good on the level they have it now. I have a couple of ways of making other areas more, what I want to call it, special than they are now. However, I think with what they actually have in the terms of music, enemies, and the setting and stuff, it's actually pretty good. These next 2 points can essentially go together. Party compositions are nearly endless and all characters are viable. I truly believe every character is viable, even though I did rank some people honestly at D and C tier. Every character in the game can be used to great success, and since they can be, that means you have many party compositions you can do. Once you get into the harder difficulty, maybe you can argue those slim down a lot just due to the HP and time restriction factor. However, in Darkest, you can really play around with a lot of party compositions and not worry about ones that are failing or if people die, because you're not going to lose if 12 people die. Overall, I think it's a great turn-based strategy. I think the damage, the speed, the skills, they're really good. It feels like a good back and forth. It doesn't feel like you do the same generic thing over and over again, like you just hit attack button, attack button, attack button. The 4 skills and the interchanging of them and how those skills are used in different rosters is very interesting, and I think it makes for a really good game. And also, unlike other games, well, more roguelike games obviously, every action typically has a consequence. It's not like you go and you reload and you try something 90 different ways to get it right the first time. You get heavily punished, which I think is fun. However, I'm also going to mention something about maybe reducing the grind a little bit in Darkest Dungeon 2 for people who don't have an incredible amount of time, or just to cut down the repetitiveness, because it can get pretty repetitive just going to the same dungeon, especially your first time through, because you're learning all the dungeons, you're learning all the bosses, you're learning the characters. There's a lot of errors, and your first playthrough is massively stretched out longer than your others due to all those errors. So I'd like to see just a little bit of grind reduced, and I'm going to have I think an idea or two for that. Now to the point of the video most of you probably want to see, things I would like to see in Darkest Dungeon 2. I think the occasional need, and I do mean occasional need, for a 5-man like roster or party composition would be really interesting. This could be for maybe final bosses and areas, special events, maybe if they have not like a Darkest Dungeon type thing again, but if they have like a main thing to do, maybe the last one of that, I think it would be really fun to mix it up. Maybe even like certain DLC areas would be pretty cool. So I think seeing the occasional 5-man roster, now this would be really hard to do because then you have to program 5 spots. So you're either going to have to keep the 5-man roster as essentially always a thing, or you're going to have to like really tweak skills in those situations. So I can see why they wouldn't add 5-man roster. It'd be very difficult. because the current skills you have, you would either have to just like generically say, okay, this character, if it can be used 3 and 4, we'll just throw it out to 5 as well. Thus, you'll have a lot of back characters. It may not be too hard, but it could be a little bit weird on the programming end. But I think it'd be really cool in really big fights. One of my tips to reduce grinding is just to have inventory upgrades and not have it reduced and not have it available immediately, but have it as a thing, such as, you know, you upgrade your stagecoach, your abbey, all that stuff. I think if you want to put it at a fairly high amount, just put it right at the end game where you can throw X amount of crests out, X amount of heirlooms, whatever have you, just so you can finally get maybe like 5 and then another 5, so you can have like something like 30 item slots wherever, or however many, 32, doesn't really matter. Just a way you can add an extra line so you can take more loot in at the champion level, because really at the champion level is where you need the heaviest loot grind at. The earlier levels, I am still fine with them keeping the same inventory space because things are very much, there's not as much as a need. In the lower levels, everything is cheaper, things don't take as many heirlooms, and heck, the dungeon actually doesn't even give you as much. So I feel like when you get to champion level, often you're passing up on a lot of gold and stuff just because you can't fit it. So I know that's part of the game, but I would like to see it as an available upgrade just to reduce grind time once you get into the end game portion. Something I think they missed big time on in Darkest Dungeon 1 here is bosses do not change between apprentice, veteran, and champion. Once you know how to defeat a boss once with one composition, there's really no reason to change it. Now, you can argue, well, yeah, what works in apprentice level might actually give you false sense of security once you get a champion. Okay, that's maybe true. An example of that might be the Brigand Pounder. The accuracy and the dodging stuff might be low enough in an apprentice where you got away with a really bad composition, and then by the time you get to the max dodge and all of that in champion, you actually lose, so you would have to then reskill and get that composition better for that boss. But overall, the boss didn't change, it's just your strategy was bad to begin with, and it was just finally exposed. So I don't really think that's a boss changing, it's just getting harder, and it breaks less sound strategies, so to say. So there's two ways I think they can go about this. You can add a skill into the veteran level and then another skill into the champion, giving them a range of 4 to 5 skills possibly, or keep 2 bosses the same, and apprentice, veteran, get us like veterans like kind of lulled back in the sense of, oh, they're just gonna three-peat, have a brand new boss, just a final boss for that area come in, because then you're like, oh, okay, I have no idea who this boss is, and now I need to go in there at champion level. I mean, imagine the stakes of that. You now don't feel confident because you have no idea what this boss can do and will do. So I think that'd be great. Just either add more bosses or just add a new skill in that just kind of changes it up. Now, I don't want the game, if they do that, to be very mean. And what I mean by that is like if you've taken the same composition as you did last time, it's just a complete counter to that. I don't want to be punished because I learned how to beat the game before, but just make it a little more difficult. It's a very fine line there, and I hope they do it well. What I would really love to see is more skills, kind of like the Houndmaster and even the Grave Robber. What I mean by that is they get like extra damage from Mark and Blight. This really allows people to play off of other characters so much more, because obviously if you just have raw damage, it doesn't really matter. Or if you can only function off of beasts, you're very limited in which dungeons you can go to. So the more we can add like, oh, you can do more damage against people who have like a bleed in or a human, well, suddenly that opens up a lot. So I kind of like that. Even the Bounty Hunter, I believe, has extra damage against human and marks. I'd like to see that a little more brought across other characters to bring some more damage characters into the mix, such as the Musketeer. Not just get her more damage on mark, but maybe also have it on someone who, I don't know, is bleeding or has a debuff applied. Something like that, just to make it a little more interesting and give more incentives on different strategies. Another thing I would love to see is another strong, viable healer. Currently, the Vestal is obviously the queen of heals, and there's really no one else like hers. Therefore, you pretty much shove her into 60-66% of your parties if you're playing in Stygian or the hardest difficulty. She's going to get thrown in almost every dungeon to ensure someone's alive. You can get away with the Occultist early, but he just kind of falls off, because obviously the Vessel gets strong, consistent heals that the Occultist cannot offer. So I need someone to do more AoE healing like she does, whether this is DOT AoE healing, or even if they sacrifice something like the Flagellant, you do AoE heal, but let's say you gain 10 stress or you get a debuff for like 2 speed, just something where someone can finally be another healer. And it can be like the Hellion, where the debuffs go away at the end, so you're not constantly carrying around debuffs afterwards. Usually that doesn't have too big of an effect, but there are times where you do take a hallway fight and then go into a room, or obviously a room into a hallway. You don't want necessarily 4 to 6 speed getting minus from you because you're just trying to heal your party. So I believe getting another strong viable healer so we don't just have to shove vessels in everywhere would be very beneficial for party compositions, and also just finally stop using a vessel. I like her as a character, but good gracious, I feel like if you go on anything medium, some medium dungeons can get away with 0 healing. Once you're in champion level, you get all the good gear, but really in the early into mid game as you're coming up, the vessels are just such a strong safety net. I'd like to see another potential safety net. Doesn't have to be a complete one, but something to satisfy me to be like, you know what, I don't need a vessel, there's this character now. Something that's a little interesting, I would like to see bonuses for clearing all bosses in an area. So whether they keep the same 3 boss archetype they have now, or they do decide to add the skills to each or a ending boss, it doesn't really matter, whatever they have. I'd like to see a clear boss area bonus. So what I mean by this is it could be additional resources, which means maybe you get like some free torches, free bandages if the area is like heavy bleed, stuff like that. Something where you're like, you know what, I'm going to rush to finish this area, because then this can be not a safe haven, but a little bit of a breeding ground for lower level characters and safer dungeons initially. Now maybe you'll argue, well, yeah, well, once you get to the champion, you beat all of them and you got all these easy, cheap dungeons. I feel like that's kind of a reward for doing that. I know the boss trinkets are technically the reward, and in Darkest Dungeon, killing all the bosses got you an achievement, and then also it worked towards the, the Caretaker's achievement as well. Achievements are nice and all, but they don't help me in-game. So I'd rather see an in-game incentive rather than, oh, look at this achievement I got. It's just something I was thinking of. You could even add more resolve to characters in that area, where they can even do like 10% more damage. Just something small that doesn't make the game necessarily easy, but you know, gives you that little bit more of a bonus. A different type of mission. So we obviously have Activate and we have Gather. I am perfectly okay if they keep that, but those get really repetitive and redundant. So something I would like to see is something called a Hunt mission. So instead of obviously gathering and activating, this would be more like kind of a battle room, but I'd prefer it to be a hallway fight. That way you gotta walk down hallways looking for a special creature. And a thing I could think of right now in Darkest Dungeon, because I have no idea what's going to be available in Darkest Dungeon 2, is like tracking down 3 undead pirates in the cove. We're obviously building off the Sunken Crew archetype, you know, they're pirates and all that, so it'd be kind of a fun story mix up. And you could say the pirates are causing mischief to the town, and you know, by stopping them, maybe X event will happen. Maybe, obviously now you get like resolve and damage increase where the Abbey becomes free, stuff like that. Well, maybe if you kill these pirates, you get like, I don't know, a free stack of food, or half your provision cost is half. I know they have that now for free, but I'm just trying to think of like something they could give. That, or maybe you get like a guaranteed sunny day where people in your town get stress reduction, you know, something that would incentivize you. That, or maybe if you hunt them down, you get X amount of gold from them, like each of them carries a trapezohedron, just something like that. Obviously that's like 10,500 gold, that's a huge incentive. You could even back it down to 3 unique gems at 1,500 each, or even 2,500, kind of like the pews on the Prophet. And also I would prefer these people to be new enemies, therefore we have new party compositions of the enemy, and it's a new enemy to learn, which I'm sure there will be plenty to do, but even more new enemies at intervals will be really fun. My last 2 are coming up here, and they're both kind of mechanic based as well. I would love to spread out the mechanics of shield break, block, and bypass, because the Jester and the shield breaker, I believe, are the only 2 individuals who can bypass block. And face it, Dirk Stab is used not all that often, and a situation where you can Dirk Stab, the 7 to 12 damage really isn't all that great. So it's down to the shield breaker. And she only bypasses guard to break guard, so she's really not even doing to necessarily damage the individual too much. She's just more of doing it just so she can break the guard. So even then, the bypass guard is kind of, it's only there so the initial ability can work, essentially. I really think they need to move that around to other characters. I think that'll make other characters more amazing, because if you go in somewhere where characters have heavy guard, you go, well, that's cute, but, you know, I'm just going to kill who you protect anyways. Now you could say, well, doesn't that defeat the point of guard? You can always put conditions on the ability such as minus 30% damage, or it has, 95 accuracy and the person they're guarding has 33. That's a 60 something percent chance to hit. Not exactly the highest. And also, that doesn't stop you, and that also doesn't guarantee you're going to kill the person blocking all that much more. It's just kind of a way that you don't have to use a stun or break guard. It just allows for some more possible damage dealers to be a little more efficient in some areas. I will also argue the same thing for armor piercing. I believe the Grave Robber and Shield Breaker are the only two with armor piercing abilities, I believe. And the Grave Robbers is terrible. I mean, there's people who can do as much raw damage as she can with Pick to the Face. So really, once again, just the Shield Breaker. So I'd like to see a couple more characters with shield, with armor piercing based abilities. My bad. Someone who actually been really cool with this is honestly the Musketeer. Can you imagine that? Like the Musketeer with armor piercing abilities. Maybe it's not like her regular shot, but she has like a heavy shot or something. The accuracy decreases, but you just go right through protection. I think that'd be pretty cool. So something like that. Obviously, I'd like to see more break guards as well. Just based on the fact that there's always stuns and stuff, but just breaking guards is fun because sometimes you don't want to stun or you can't stun again. You just want to break a guard. I think they should really spread those out more. And one of my last things, I will actually talk a little more. All of this is on my on-script stuff. I'll kind of work my way around here eventually with the other stuff. Kind of talking about what I maybe want to see more characters, what I want to see happen to the characters now, what I think they're going to do. But these are my initial wishes, or at least thoughts that will hopefully happen. So last one. Marks should last a turn longer or stay until used. And that sounds possibly overpowered, but I don't think so, because only one person is going to get to function on it. So you might actually assume that's worse than it is now, and it would be in some situations, but a whole lot better in others. Because if you're waiting for your big, damage dealer in the back and the boss moves 2 turns in a row, it might be gone, and you're just sitting there like, oh, okay, well now it's gone, and my mark strategy is kind of bleh. Or the other thing you could do is, I think you could make 2 marks to tiers. Well, 2 mark tiers. You could have one like Come Hither, where it marks, but it's a weaker one and it has a turn duration. Or you can make it like what I call a raw mark. Pretty much your main ability, where your main purpose is just going to mark. And then you're going to have someone just absolutely smash on it. Because the marking in Darkest Dungeon right now, you can hit really hard, but I feel like it needs to have a little bit more of a raw damage guaranteed. Obviously, the critical strikes that would come from that would be insane. So if you could find a way to... There's really no way to increase the lower end, because if you just say 200% damage, obviously 7 to 14 goes to what? Would it be like 21 something, whatever. So we'll say 100% damage, 14 to 28. There's really no way to guarantee lower damage, unless you do like 100% damage. And I don't know if the game would do this, but it's interesting. You could say like plus 10. That way, even if you get 14, it's now 24. So if you don't crit, it's 38. Yeah, 38 on a non-crit. And if you do crit, you could actually have it outside of the crit. So you could get your 42 crit plus 10, and then it would be 52. So it's not like the crit becomes exponentially large, but your raw, yeah, I think I actually like that. Your raw damage could be exceptionally more large. So therefore, the mark would still be good on just raw damage, and your crits can still be big and just slightly bigger with the added 10 or something. And I think you could easily scale that. You could make it like 5, 6, 7, 8 or something, or 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever you need to do to increase it by 1 until you get to 10. I think 10 is a really strong number for champion. So I think you should make it 10. You could make it maybe 8, something like that. Play around. I don't know how much HP enemies are going to have, so I can't say for sure 10's good. It might be low. It might be very high. I don't know. Now, these are going to be more of my free thoughts. Like I said, all of that was very scripted, but it did hit on a lot of things I wanted to see. Mechanic changes, small area changes. And now to kind of go, I guess I'll call it grandiose. I think 4 areas is a lot of areas, in all honesty, for programming, graphics, and all that. But with them having such success, there we go, on Darkest Dungeon, I think they could afford to go to 5 unique areas. Now what they can do is maybe make each area a little quicker. And what I mean by that is, yeah, see, instead of doing like 3 bosses in each area to feel like you're doing something, you're going through the apprentice, you're going through the veteran, you're going through the yada yada yada. I think what you could do is just have maybe 2 bosses in each area. You could have one for the first level if they want to keep that, and then that second level would be the second boss. That way, like, the bosses, they could be bigger and badder, but you would only fight 2, which I think I'd be okay with that, because like I said, the fighting of bosses gets to be very repetitive, and I don't think it offers a whole lot different gameplay, in all honesty. The best thing about boss missions is typically the trinket, the gold, and obviously the resolve, because it functions as a long dungeon in terms of resolve gain. But in all honesty, do I need to fight the hag 3 times, sending in 2 highwaymen and a hellion? No, I don't need to do that crap 3 times, because I know how to trash her, and at each level doesn't change. She just kills herself on riposte. Do I really need to do that? Not at all. Do I need to go into the prophet and reduce his damage 3 times in a row to kill him? No, I'd prefer not to do that. So I'd really prefer they make each boss a little more unique, give them a little more skills, give them maybe a little bit more of a dungeon build up. What you could do is have, like, kind of make it like the second level, the darkest dungeon, and not for every boss, but maybe for the final main bad boss in the area, the second one. You could have like a mission pre to that, like the pre-boss mission where you're like, okay, we need this item, or story-wise, we need to destroy these. Ooh, let's make it a lich, for example. Lich, I believe in mythology, and commonly have something called, I think it's a what's it called? A lithactory? No, that's wrong. Oh my gosh, I remember what it's called. But anyway, liches, I think they tend to put their soul in something. So you could be like, the first mission, we got to go break the thing with the lich's soul in it. So we got to go kill slightly harder enemies in compositions. It could even not be a randomized dungeon, so you could make sure it's definitely difficult, or at least scheduled amount of fights. I think that would be okay. So you'd break that, and then you'd have to go fight said lich yourself. So that way you feel like the build up. You're like, alright, I got his soul vessel killed. Now I'm going to go take down the lich. That way you have some extra, what I want to call, experience with the boss. Heck, you can even have a, I don't like forced fight failures in Darkest Dungeon, so I'm trying to find a way that the bosses in the game could interact with you. Maybe like background or curios, you could learn about them and like what they've done in the area. You know, you could have the bosses really own it. I know they try to kind of do that with the intro screens where, you know, the caretaker says, not the caretaker, but the guy says, you know, this is what I hired them for, this is why she is the way she is. That's all cool and all, but that's all very much in the past. You kind of want something that's in the moment, something that really directly affects you and gives you a really good reason to take down the boss, other than, oh, boss is bad, dude made a mistake, they got corrupt over time, let me go take them down. So whether that's done through curios, the bosses messes with you through curios, I wouldn't want them to be a roaming thing, or they actually, you know what, it wouldn't be a forced failure. What you could do is have the boss show up for a turn or two, and maybe lock 2 out of his 4 spells, not spells, but abilities used. That way, like, you can get a hint of what he does, but obviously he reserves his back 2 spells, or, well, I keep saying spells, well, it's a lich, sorry. But the back 2 abilities, as like, oh, I'm gonna get you when you really come. Like, I'm gonna toy with you when you're apprentice and veteran level. And how you would defeat that is just take away, like, I don't know, 50 HP, 40 HP. Just something, smack them around a little bit, and he's like, alright, you know, they're formidable. I don't want to kill them yet, because, like, every good, stupid bad guy does, I want to play with them. Because, you know, if you're a lich, you've lived X amount of time, you don't really care about 4 travelers until one day, obviously, the pride, the hubris gets you. So I think that'd be a really cool. Once again, who knows? Sorry, that was a long tangent just to say I'd like bosses to be more in quality, less in quantity. So I hope they take that. Who knows, if I could talk to the designers and they would listen to me, I think that's something I would try to tell them. I could get into touch with Red Hook, we'll see. If you guys actually think some of these ideas are good, let me know. It's probably way too late in development now, especially for something of that level. But maybe in the alpha, I will actually try to talk to Red Hook if they think my channel is either large enough where my ideas and my opinion are matter. Because there's a lot of people who play this game, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who tell Red Hook, I know how to make your game better. So really, I just kind of want to let them do their thing. But it would always be cool to have someone pay a little more attention to your thoughts, because I have sunk, I think, 350 hours in the game. Some for recording, some not, but still, it's a lot of hours in the game. I've dived pretty far in, so I think the big thing people are probably wondering about is areas and heroes as well. They may, how I want to say this, they may keep archetypes or very similar ruin-based stuff. I'd be very surprised, well, maybe not actually. I'd be completely surprised if they made 4 or 5 completely new areas. Like, they didn't reuse any of the enemies. They certainly could, but the reason why I'm saying I'm surprised is I think they want to keep some familiarity, because we all, whether we admit it or not, we like familiarity, and once we start getting into this new game, we want to kind of pull something from the old games. Take Halo for example. Halo, you still fight the Covenant, the Flood, all that stuff, but they add in new ones. So you're like, oh, these are new enemies, they're kind of weird, but hey, I still know that's a Grunt, I still know that's a Jackal, I still know that's an Elite. So even though they make the enemies new, they make the areas new, you still fight on very similar concepts, such as obviously rings and stuff. So I think Darkest Dungeon will do something like that. They'll be like, oh, look at this new enemy, but guess what? Swine Hooker. I'm still going to say Swine Hooker. I know it's Meat Hooker, but I think it's funnier to say Swine Hooker. And you'll be like, aha, it's a Swine Hooker, and then, you know, you'll laugh and cry when they crit you and all that stuff, and then you'll deal with the new enemies. But I really hope they do throw in some new enemies, but I don't think they have to go overboard. They don't have to make like 10 new enemies per area. I think that will get convoluted. And if they make too many, once again, the depth won't be there. And I'd prefer more in-depth enemies rather than just random people I have to chop through. They can make new heroes. I don't think they should go extremely crazy on the skills like they do in mods. And honestly, the Shield Breaker is about as far as I would like to see one character go. And some people might argue the Shield Breaker really doesn't have that much going on with her, and what I will say is the constant moving, the like shield breaks and all that stuff, she actually has a lot going on. And I don't need all my characters to be doing that, because then you start feeling like, alright, if she backs up, she moves there, then if she activates it, it just feels like it'd be pretty tedious to put a composition together. Maybe not, who knows. People play with mod classes all the time, they probably work very well together, but I just think to make it easier on their end, and they can always allow people to make their own mods. I don't think the game designer should try to do the job of the community. I think the initial main thing for the company to do is make very good, reliable characters, simple to medium knowledge to understand. I don't think you should make anyone painfully hard to understand. It is a turn-based game. You don't want to sit there and feel like you need like a PhD in mechanic theories to figure out how the heck this character works. I don't think that's very good. But I do think someone like the Leper could have easily had something just more unique, such as his ability was a Chop. Chop could have easily been like, hey, this gets more damage against human, or that's something I thought of, kind of like Wicked Slice. This damage gets, Chop gets more damage against non-protection based enemies. Therefore, he could really be like the absolute, what I'm going to call the paper shredder. If you have no armor, the Leper's going to like one-shot you. That's his deal. You know what? No armor, gone. And then obviously if you have protection, he's going to suffer a little bit, and his row diversity would. So I kind of want to see stuff like that. Add on to skills that are already there, make them basic damage, but throw in just a caveat or two. I don't think you need to make anything crazy, because I think most of the stuff they had was already good. I just think there could have been a little more things to just get extra damage in there, just to incentivize different fighting strategies. Because it feels kind of repetitive at moments, because you don't feel like you always have a lot of options. And something I obviously would like to see, but I honestly don't have much of my own. I think another form of DOTs, they have Blight and Bleed. You could easily have like psychic damage in a way. You could have a character who's more psychic damage oriented, and that could be applied to your debuff resistance rather than also your Blight and Bleed. I think that would be pretty cool. That would allow a new character, technically a new mechanic, but be something different. So I think that'd be pretty cool. Other mechanics, I don't know. They have Repose, Shield Break. I think the mechanics they have for what the game is, obviously they could completely change how combat works. Thus a lot of mechanics are going to be different, but assuming they keep similar mechanics, I think the mechanics they have are very good, and I don't think they need to necessarily add too many more or change it too much. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed these thoughts. I hope you thought some were good. Some of them I'm still on the fence about, but you don't really know an idea sticks until you try it, or at least test play it. So I'm looking forward to Darkest Dungeon 2. I'm looking forward to more years of Hidden SQuiDZ gaming, and obviously more and more conversations that you guys bring. Thank you so much.